Okay, so I thought that song was I Saw the Sun, and it was gonna be like a whole like joke, but because remember when we did it that one day? But the song is actually called I Saw the Sign, not I Saw the Sun. So it took me a while to find it, and I got it wrong. Woo, she's cold up here. We have our Beyonce fans on. Welcome everyone. Welcome to Manny's. Who is it the first time at Manny's? Raise your hand. Yes, you. It's not your first time. No, you're a regular. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here as part of our What We Learned series. Manny's is a civic and political event and gathering space. And we've been having such a great time over this whole week learning about different issues, meeting different leaders on these issues, and really going deep. So we're going to do that tonight. Before we do that, we have a little tradition, and that's asking everyone to introduce themselves to someone around them that they don't know, and just exchange names and maybe tell them why you're here tonight. So take a second and introduce yourself to someone that you don't know. All right, do we make some friends? Guys, friends are so important. Friends are the most important thing. Men, forget about them. Forget about the men, they don't matter, or women, or whatever. Friends, the most important thing. That's what tonight's conversation is going to be about. No. Tonight we're talking about the environment. Woo, that joke just went right back. That's okay. That's okay. So, you guys, I just want to say for a second that I have felt very much today not present. Like I've been thinking about what's happening tomorrow, what's happening now, or not now, but the past. I just really want us to take a second and ground ourselves here, in this moment, in this place, on this day. What day is it, Ben? The 12th of August, 2021. God damn it, it's almost the fall. And just say thank you all very much for showing up in person for this event, and thank you to everyone who's joined on Zoom. We really appreciate you to have this important conversation about the environment, climate change, sustainability, our city, and the world. So thank you, and thank you for allowing me to be present here tonight. A couple quick things. If you've consumed food and beverage, you're supporting a nonprofit restaurant in San Francisco, Farming Hope. They hire and train formerly homeless and formerly incarcerated individuals in our kitchen, and they train them in restaurant skills and abilities, and then they place them into full-time employment. Really proud of them. Yeah, they're awesome. Let's give them a round of applause. And what else is there? A couple plugs. We've got some amazing upcoming events. We're planning a lot of fun ones for September. There will be an Uno tournament on September 10th. So sharpen those Uno skills because I want to win that tournament. There's going to be a really big prize. And lots of other stuff. So without further ado, if you want to take a picture tonight, please tag us at Welcome to Manny's. We love it. We appreciate it. Let's spread the word. And with that, let's bring to the stage the Director of the Department of the Environment, Debbie Raphael. Hi, Debbie.
So, do I have my own mic?
You do. It's right behind your pillow. There it is. It's hiding a little bit. Let's see if it works.
I was looking down there. Hi, Manny.
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
We have a student over here at UC Berkeley.
Oh my God.
So, young environmentalist, let's just say we are grateful for people who choose that as a major. Yes.
What's your major, young student, man?
Conservation Resource Studies.
Conservation Resource Studies. Wow, that sounds necessary.
It sounds necessary.
Yeah.
Yes.
We had such a good conversation just then in the back. You have such an amazing, given the fact that you work on an issue that could turn someone to like a basket case, like anxious person, like world's ending all the time. You have such an amazing calm and poise and like strength. How?
Yeah, that is a definite, it is a coping mechanism. You know, one of the things people always want to know, is, are you hopeful? Are you hopeless? Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? And Joanna Macy, who is one of my heroes, she is a phenomenal spiritual and environmental guru for me. She, so I'm going to tell you this story as an answer to that, because it really was sort of a paradigm for me. She said, when people ask her that, she says, you know, that's not the right question. If someone had gone to David before he took on Goliath and said, oh my God, David, you are this little guy with a slingshot. You've got this giant in front of you. So are you feeling hopeful right now? David would have looked at them and said, hopeful? What are you talking about? I'm just making sure my slingshot works. And her message is that staying in the are you hopeful or are you hopeless frame is not where action happens. Action happens by simply putting one foot in front of the other. And when I tend to get, sorry, the mask thing is really a journey.
A journey.
Yeah,
I
you get it
love
on your
that.
nose.
It is a journey.
It is a journey, yeah. So for me, I just have to remind myself that it's not about fixing the entire atmospheric concentration of CO2. Like if that is on my shoulders, I'm gonna crawl into a hole and cry. But what is on my shoulders is to bring myself, my whole self, not just my intellectual self, but my whole self to my job every day. I'm a scientist by training, a public servant by choice. I'm a deep believer in the power of democracy. And that is what fuels me, is that and that's all I can be. That's all any of us can be, is our whole selves right now, because it's overwhelming.
I love that. Does that resonate with folks? Just to be your whole self in this moment and put one foot in front of the other. That really resonates with me today. You know, we talked in the beginning of the pandemic for our Manny Super Civic Cyber Conversations. And we talked about a lot of different things. And here we are. Pandemic has not ended, unfortunately, but she's in her waning hours, if I have anything to do with it. Yep, knock on big brain of yours, knock on smaller brain of mine, okay, or wood. And I guess I just want to ask you, looking back, kind of, what would you say the net effect that the pandemic had on specifically your department's kind of goals and the things that you're trying to accomplish? We're going to talk about kind of climate more broadly and the effect it had on the environment, but I wanted to ask you, well, since I have you, we did a conversation at the beginning. Yeah, how has it affected the trajectory and the goals of your department?
Deeply. I mean, in a word, it has affected us deeply, and on so many levels. So I would answer that question, that how has it affected us individually as civil servants? I run a department of 100 people. We are all public or civil servants by choice. And what the pandemic showed us, because we were called upon to be disaster service workers, the last time you and I talked, Manny, I was actually at Moscone Center trying to find a quiet place. And I remember it was really windy and my notes flew away.
Yes, and you had a high visibility vest, I think?
Yes, I definitely had a high
It was a great
visibility vest. But what that opportunity did is it showed us how connected we were, not just people to people, but department to department. So the city can be so siloed. You know, Department of the Environment is here, and MTA is here, and PUC is here, and DPH is here. You know, we have all of our acronyms. And the pandemic said, no, you're a city employee, and you're here for the betterment of the city. So come to Moscone or go to a testing site or go to a food bank and work together for the betterment of San Francisco. And that changed my staff. I mean, I had low-level staff that were invited to be leaders at testing sites. They were given, because it wasn't a civil service designation, they were allowed to supervise people and lead and discover what they're capable of and make relationships with people that they never would have come in contact with. So the pandemic affected my department very personally, because now my staff understand that they're part of this bigger network of civil servants. And we have relationships that now we're gonna draw on. So when we want to work with small businesses, let's say, to get them comfortable with reusable bags again, we have relationships with the Department of Public Health who's issuing the orders. We have relationships with, OEWD, the Office of Workforce and Economic Development, who can introduce us to different leaders in the small business world. And all those are relationships that happened because of the pandemic. So
Amazing,
that is one way.
awesome. And how about, because so much what we talked about was setting goals for what kind of
Yes,
inputs and outputs a city should have as it relates to climate. Has the pandemic changed that?
well, so yes, and one thing I will say is the pandemic didn't stop us from working on climate change. So the pandemic pointed out the obvious to all of us, that we're all connected. And that something can happen in a market in Wuhan, China, that has to do with perhaps.
Wasn't it, I thought it was in like a Bill Gates kind of like laboratory or something, wasn't it?
So maybe,
Oh,
no,
okay.
that's the vaccine, I think, but yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, no, that was sarcastic, by the way. So just to be clear, but things that happen because of habitat destruction and interaction of humans and wildlife way across the world affect everyone, right? So that's the no-brainer understanding. But that relates also, of course, to the impact of climate, that the emissions that we do here in San Francisco affect the island community who's suffering from sea level rise. The other thing that it showed us was that we have this phenomenal ability to actually work together. So think about this. Think about the fact that 9 Bay Area County health officers all got together and decided we should wear masks. And all got together and decided we should do a lockdown. And then the next day we did. I mean, I don't know that that's ever happened.
And do you think the reason, the forcing function for that was because there was a mortal danger, people thought they were gonna die? Okay, so.
Well, there was a sense of urgency and there was an unknown. I don't know that we were convinced we were gonna die,
Right,
but we were sufficiently worried that we were going to die.
so how do you reproduce that for climate, because,
That's the question.
right, because everyone's saying like people are gonna die.
Yes.
And also like cities on the coast are gonna have to relocate or, stop existing. But how do you get that same, I mean, this is the gajillion-dollar question, but you're right, we learned this in the pandemic that the entire world can work kind of in unison if they're faced with a potentially deadly communicable disease. What just first round lessons do you think the climate movement can apply to their work as a result?
First of all, that it's physically possible, that it isn't impossible, like we can get jaded, people never work together and bureaucrats will never work together and jurisdictions all only want their own self-interest. So we have an example now, a concrete example where that wasn't the case. So that's number one that climate activists can understand. And then the question is, what will it take to get that same sense of urgency? Is it enough that we have wildfires burning? Is it enough? Do we need more orange sky days here? I mean, is that really what we need? Is a few more of those or an annual orange sky day? Do we need, how bad does the drought have to get for us to take action? And honestly, I think that's the question that's being asked all over the world right now, is what is it, Greta Thunberg is yelling at us, right? She's saying, come on, it's urgent, the science is clear. Get off of your complacency. But I don't see it yet, and I don't know.
Do you feel like the no Sunday was a turning point? Do people agree? No? Not your.
The orange sky.
When the sun didn't come out? At least I'll just admit that for me, climate change became real that day. Just because I was like, wait a second, I can't see the sun. This is crazy, because of the wildfires. And so for me, that was a turning point. Do you feel like that day changed? Did that happening in the Bay affect the department at all, or the policies of the city, or was it just kind of like a, oh God, that was crazy?
No, I think it did. I mean, we have now a climate emergency resolution. Now, fair enough, you can say that's just on paper. But I think our elected officials, I'm feeling it as a department head. I'm feeling like the elected officials are coming to me more than they ever did and said, yes, we have a fentanyl problem. Yes, we have an affordability problem. Yes, we have a homeless problem. We have a climate problem and we need to know what to do. And when you think about what has happened in this city in the last 3 months, so we've had a pandemic, we've had all sorts of reasons to focus in other ways, but in the last 3 months in this city, we have taken phenomenal steps towards climate action, towards leading by example. We have adopted the most aggressive climate goals of any major city. We are right up there with European cities in terms of what we're saying we are going to do and the modeling to get there. We've banned the use of natural gas in new construction. We have committed to having 100% renewable electricity by 2025. I mean, that's phenomenal. And that means everyone in San Francisco can operate on 100% renewable electricity. And therefore we just have to get off of natural gas and we have to get off of diesel and gasoline because our alternative is so clean. So I do feel like it shifted things for people. I think the orange sky was actually a super helpful visual.
Awesome. In a way, kind of thankful for it. You know, it was a wake-up call, or not a wake-up call because the sun didn't come out.
And I think what's so striking about it, besides the fact that the sun didn't come out, is that the fires weren't here. It's not like we were burning.
Right, and the Dixie Fire actually.
The Dixie
The
fire.
thing about the Dixie Fire is like everyone's talking about it, but it's not affecting our
No.
air quality yet, and so I'm not hearing as much, hubbub about it, which just goes to show,
I know.
it is tough. So let's talk about the Ipcc
Oh my
report.
goodness, yes, let's talk about it.
Because it's making a lot of news. So how I mean, it's a long report. I did not read it. I will admit that. But how after hearing about it and hearing about some of the conclusions, just quickly like reactions and also has it affected the work of the department at all?
So the Ipcc report is 3,500 pages, and so I will give a brownie point to anyone who can say they've read it. And they did a executive summary, so they call it a policymaker summary, because they know nobody's really gonna read 3,500 pages.
I think I asked Tomas, our head of research, like, can you read it and tell me what happened?
Guess how many pages it is?
You said 3,500.
No, the whole report,
Oh.
but the executive summary.
Oh yeah, I asked them for the one pager.
Yeah, well, the executive summary is 41 pages long,
Oh
so
my
it's-
God.
it's very long, so
long.
it takes a lot, but what is really sobering, and that's the word I use a lot, I hear a lot, is I didn't read all the text, but I looked at the graphs. And so the thing that to understand about, and that the Ipcc report is saying is, even if today we got off of all fossil fuels, so we stopped putting things into the atmosphere today, we would still have climate change because we've already put too much CO2 into the air. So the thing that I take away from this report is that it's going to be very dangerous. What's dangerous to me is that people hear that and say, well,
It's too late.
It's too late, screw it, I'm just gonna drive my car and I'm just gonna, not worry about what the next generation is because it's too late and there's nothing I can do. So I think it's having that kind of sobering message is tricky because it's honest and it's dangerous. And it's dangerous because the one thing that is the worst thing to happen from that Ipcc report is apathy, and it's to give up. And so to your first question to me is about being optimistic and how do I do that? I'm optimistic, but I'm not confident. And I think that that's edge of not being confident that we're really going to act fast enough is what keeps me on my toes to keep moving. So the Ipcc report, honestly, the deniers at this point, what are you gonna do? I mean, they are not interested in the facts, they're interested in the story that they wanna live with. And so, yes, it's great to have an IPCC report that gives you more and more facts that are so overwhelming. I don't know that what we're lacking is facts at this point. So I think the IPCC report is important for someone. But for me, it's not that important.
So for the, thank you for that. So for the San Franciscan that read it, no one read it. For the San Franciscan that
I was aware of it.
that aware of it, read the headlines, oh my God, because when it filtered down to little old me, I was like, damn, this shit's coming.
Exactly,
So that's what I took from it. So you don't even need 42 pages. I just did it.
right?
Yeah, that's the one liner. The shit's coming. Like, there is this feeling of lack of empowerment, like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? So this is, I know this is a hard one to answer, but as the director of the Department of the Environment of one of the most progressive cities in the world, like, what would you tell that person that feels like there's nothing I can do about it? And I know I asked you this before, but like, are there concrete things that we can do in this room, in this community, in this city to actually make a difference, so that the next IPCC report is a little bit sunnier? Using the term sunny in like a figurative way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer that the answer to that is absolutely yes. That everyone has the power to start wherever you are and to take a look in your own personal life. It is all about choices. Everything is about choices. How did you get here today? Did you take transit? Did you walk? If you drove, was it an electric car? If you can't drive an electric car because you can't afford it or you don't have charging, what can you do about that? What did you do? What are you gonna do when you go home and you make dinner? Are you going to make sure that you put as much into your green bin as possible? Because that's gonna become compost and that's gonna heal the planet, because that is how we change soil chemistry and actually make the soil carbon sink. Are you going to sign up for Deep Green and Clean Power SF? You know, in San Francisco, there are so many choices. Now, what I will say is, if we stop there with our own personal life, we're never gonna reach the scale we need to. And so really the question is how do we scale? And we do that starting at the individual levels by talking about this, by sharing your journey with those around you, by saying to people, I'm worried about climate change, this is what I'm doing. What are you doing? How can we do this together? Start with your circles. Let's get beyond the usual suspects. I don't know, when I talk to, so my mother is not the usual suspect. My mother, sorry, Mom, if you're listening, and I don't know that she is.
Hi, Mom.
She voted for Trump twice. She is an incredibly educated woman. She reads 3 newspapers a day. She's a daughter of Holocaust survivors. And yet, I don't recognize, that decision. And so my journey is to talk to my mother about why this matters and what can she do and what can we do. And it's not easy for me, I'm telling you, it is not an easy conversation. And so I think the challenge for all of us is to find those not so easy conversations and talk about this and share what you're doing and invite others to join you. We have to scale. And honestly, San Francisco, I call it the bubble inside the bubble. So the bubble is California and the Bay Area is the bubble inside the bubble. So that's great because we're gonna take risks, we're gonna pilot, we're gonna make mistakes, we're gonna try new things. But it can't stay in San Francisco, right? It's got to get out to Stockton. So my question for myself is, how do I work with Tracy? How do I work with Fresno? So
Oh
that
my God, I thought Tracy was just like a random person. I'm so sorry. I was like, who's Tracy? Why is it so hard for you to work with her? What does she
wonderful towns that have wonderful people.
Okay,
Yes,
I was like, we need to bring Tracy in
we
here.
do need to
We
bring
have a
Tracy, will you
mediation.
find her? Yes.
I will find, I will find Tracy. I want to ask one more pandemic question, which is, I saw this graph, I know, I don't want to talk about it either, but we have to. December 2021, no, we haven't gotten there yet, 2020, already, basically like, I saw this chart that showed how the pandemic did cause a major decrease in carbon and methane output, but we are already now seeing more carbon and methane output than we were seeing pre-pandemic levels, which to me, that translates to there was not a permanent change was not made to our behavior. Seeing dolphins in the Venice canals did not get everyone to be like, you know what, I'm not gonna do that thing anymore. And industry didn't change necessarily, but you're an actual expert in this stuff. So can you tell me, did you see, like actual major shifts in the way people think about their relationship to the environment? And then if not, how did we miss that opportunity?
So the one place I did see it in San Francisco was the deep connection people now have to green and open space. Like, I think most people took it for granted, and Phil Ginsburg would really be sad about this. He's so proud, the head of Rec and Park, that San Francisco is a city where every resident is within 10 minutes of a green open space or park. And that's the global goal, by the way. That is the global goal, and San Francisco's already there. So yes, it's phenomenal, and yay to us. And I think most of us took that for granted before the pandemic. And now, we want slow streets, we want the Great Highway, we want Valencia Street, we want our open space, and we treasure our parks. And so I think that is the one I'm hoping permanent thing, is that we really do understand the importance of nature in the city. And for those who didn't get enough of it, they moved out to San Francisco, and that's really sad. So I think even those, of us who stayed around know that it's even more important to foster those. Other than that, let's take recycling and composting. So the good news is, if you compare 2019 to 2020, we reduced what went to landfill by 16%. So that's awesome, that's totally what we want to do. However, if you look at our use of single-use items in 2019 versus 2020, and think about your own behavior going to the grocery store and how you couldn't use a reusable bag, or going to Starbucks or wherever and you can't bring your own cup, the amount of single-use items skyrocketed. And if you look at what showed up in Pier 96 for the blue bin, the amount of cardboard was phenomenal. So what that meant was, yes, we weren't commuting to work, but we were bringing trucks into our neighborhood because we were doing so much online retail. And when you look at retail numbers for San Francisco, the sales tax from retail went way down in San Francisco. The lost sales tax because of online went way up, those sales. So it's a fascinating trade-off in our choices and behavior. I won't say that we had choices necessarily, but what I will say is I hope that's not permanent. Like, I really do hope that the message for us is that this is a muscle memory for us, that we remember what it was like pre-pandemic to bring a cup, bring our bag, shop locally, because the pandemic did show us the importance of local supply chains too.
I am normally the upbeat, like, I believe in it kind of person. And I don't want to not be that person in this moment, though. I have to remember, I interviewed Mayor Reed not long ago here, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, I don't remember. And we talked about how the way people treated each other in the beginning of the pandemic really made her feel so proud in our city, the way we all work together. And how now she is seeing folks revert back to the same old ways, not knowing their neighbor, doing their own thing, people being mean to you. There's just like that feeling of community where we all really needed to like lock arms and support each other. It was a very beautiful thing. And she was kind of sad that she felt like it was waning. And I guess I don't think I agree necessarily. I don't think I'm there yet, but I'm worried that we're not going to remember the lessons from the pandemic. Is there anything that you think you can do as a leader in the city, me, I don't know, whoever I am, and sitting on the stage in my small business, to keep people to remember the good things about what we learned? Like, how can we keep that fire burning?
That is such a great question, and it's, for one, because it's a little bit of a dilemma for us, because some of the things in the pandemic we actually don't want you to do anymore, right? We really want you to forget about all that online ordering and forget about all the single use, and go back to how you were before, because we had such amazing, great trained behavior here. this idea of love of your neighbor and empathy for those around you, and an understanding that we are all one human race that needs each other to survive. I think that starts honestly with political discourse. I think it starts at the top, with leaders saying how important that is and demonstrating it. And then it's each of us on a personal level, making a commitment to check in on our neighbors. I don't know, it's about personal choices and and as a leader, what I can do is lead by my example with my staff and with my community to show up. I mean, I'm a real believer that the world is run by those who show up, the world is changed by those who show up, but that's not enough. It's not enough to be politically active. It's about community and connection. And that starts with each of us. And I know it's something I think a lot about, so I don't have a magic answer. And I'd love to hear what people think. I mean, I think that's a super fundamental question because we're never gonna tackle the super gnarly challenges of our time if we're doing it from a place of, I got mine, so I'm good, you know.
Well, I think that's a great place to end our portion of this conversation and open it up to you all. And so questions for the director, and also answer to her question. If you have ideas how we can keep some of the greatness and the good things from the early days without the negative things. I don't know that maybe give it to us in case someone is more soft-spoken than the other. Why don't we start with our friend who is studying, let me see if I remember, conservation and resource studies. What is your question and do you have an answer?
So I have an idea, but I do have a question as well.
Why don't we start with whatever you want to start with?
I'll start with the idea. So what role do you guys, in terms, you're in the political sphere, right? A little bit more political sphere. But what role do you think businesses, and not just businesses, but startups would play, entrepreneurship would play in the role of disrupting what is going on in the world, in terms of like environmentalism and creating environmental solutions that are also economic? So what would you think about entrepreneurship as being a solution to that?
You know, for me, the solutions require risk-taking and creativity, right? We can't do the same thing over and over again. Everybody calls that the definition of insanity. And so the idea of entrepreneurship, if it's based on risk-taking and it's based on creativity and it's grounded in service to humanity and not greed. So that's the thing that for me that I get worried a little bit with entrepreneurship is if it's not grounded in unintended, if you're not aware of unintended consequences. So let's just think about when we first had or TNCs, you know, when we think about Uber and Lyft, super disruptive, super entrepreneurial, lots of unintended consequences. And we need companies to be at the table with government, with civil society, to own the unintended consequences and work through them. And I'm super grateful that Uber and Lyft exist because I think they've really challenged us to rethink what mobility means. So I do think there's benefit, and there's also, it's got to be grounded in this public good, and greed worries me sometimes.
Cool. So yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, so I think where my head goes in college as a solution to the greed aspect of entrepreneurship is to do education-based entrepreneurship. That is an education-based company that is basically disrupting some of the old practices of the education sector of the world, specifically with youth and kids, and then diving into that, making them pay money because that helps them pay attention, right? Because paying money actually helps people pay attention, and then delivering content that not just helps them with their own like situation, but helps them become better citizens for the world in terms of environmentalism.
The youth is where it's at, right? That is, and how do we empower youth to not get apathetic and not give up, but understand their power? And if your idea can tap into the power, that, I love it. I want to learn more.
Awesome, what's your name?
My name is Garrett.
Garrett. I'm glad you're here. Next question. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Debbie. This has been great. I've learned a lot. I have a few questions, but I guess I also just want to comment too. I really appreciate what you said about the David and Goliath kind of metaphor, because I struggle, of course, with like the, you know, how do you stay hopeful question. I'm an environmental writer, so you know I'm around it a lot. So I really appreciate that. To-go containers and single-use items have definitely been on my mind for the last 12 months.
Good.
And you mentioned, you know, the idea of kind of letting go of single-use bags and plastic bags from grocery stores. So I'm just curious how much the Department of Environment supersedes that, you know, regulates or controls that, you know, and when can we maybe see any sort of action, you know, no more single use, like you're allowed to bring your own mugs now. I know everything changes every day with the pandemic, but is there any sort of, what can you tell us about like where that might be?
Yeah, we're really about to really dive into that in terms of an outreach and education. So part of our challenge is we have a whole wonderful group of young people called Environment Now, and their job is to go into the community and be boots on the ground outreach, but they've been grounded, right? They've been not able to go into the community because business owners don't necessarily want them in there doing their outreach with them because they're busy doing their own thing. So we're about to deeply engage. So our first step was to work with the Department of Public Health and get the health order to be changed so that it's legally allowed. So it is now legally allowed to bring your own mug and bring your own bag. So that's fixed on the Department of Public Health side. But now it's, do businesses know? Are they willing to do it? And that is a public outreach piece that we are mobilizing to do now that businesses, and we don't want to do it in a punitive way, like you're gonna get fined if you don't do it. It's more, hey, this is the San Francisco thing to do. There is no reason not to do it. And what helps us, because we are a finite group of people, is when customers say to the business, I want this, I value your business, I support you, and I want to bring my own mug, I want to bring my own bag, it matters. And so this idea of practicing your own, but then sharing your opinion with others, this is a really concrete way people can help us, is by letting businesses know if you see, and honestly, if you see somebody who really just needs to get talked to, please let us know, because we're happy to go, like if a business is using those single-use plastic bags that are really thin and, you know, that are illegal, we actually want to know that because we want to.
Debbie's gonna get Tracy.
Yes.
She's gonna call Tracy.
I'm gonna call Tracy and
She's gonna
coming
send
out.
Tracy out to that grocery store and say,
Yeah, Tracy's grumpy.
you don't wanna meet Tracy. You said you had a few questions. Is there another one you wanted to ask?
Well, I guess I just kind of wanted to get a sense too of like the top like two or three things that like Department of Environment is really focusing on right now.
Sure.
If you don't mind sharing that.
Yeah, 2 or 3 things. That's always hard because I feel like if my staff listen to me and I don't say what they're working on, they'll be really bummed.
Yeah.
So the first thing we're working on is trying to, the beauty about climate change is that the solutions are not mysterious. They're actually really simple to understand. We have to get off of fossil fuels. Just and you know, mic drop, right? That's it. So we are concentrated on how do we get off of natural gas in existing buildings. That's really hard. Supervisor Marr did a study on that, showed that it could cost, if we just did it tomorrow, it would cost $6.5 billion. So obviously that's not what we're gonna do. So we're trying to figure out what are the levers that we have to get existing buildings to become all electric that doesn't ride on the backs of the poor and the underserved. So how are we going to address this issue with an equity focus? So that's one giant thing. The other giant thing that we're really trying to figure out is what is getting in the way of San Franciscans from electrifying their transportation? What are the key points of insertion that we need to do that would move the needle the most? So we're doing a lot of work now, mapping out who's got electric vehicles, where the charging stations are, how do we get enough electricity out of PG&E to put fast chargers in. So that's the second big, because transportation and buildings. And then the third big thing, and of course, with that is again, looking at who benefits most from electrification in the underserved communities and how do we make it possible for them first? Because once you do that, then everyone else flows from that. And the third big idea is we've really focusing on food waste, trying to reduce food waste. Because when you think about a banana, so you don't eat your banana. So instead you throw it in, let's just assume you do totally the wrong thing with it, you put it in your black bin. That banana, then you've wasted all of the carbon that went into growing the banana. You've wasted all of the carbon that went into transporting the banana. You've not eaten the banana, so you're not taking care of your own hunger. And then you put it in a black bin where it goes to a landfill and it's methane, which is 86 times more potent than CO2. So the first answer is put it in the green bin, fine. But the real answer.
I'm sorry, okay, it was black and I really didn't want to eat
Banana
it.
bread.
And I don't eat banana bread, look at me.
I know.
Put in your smoothie.
So put it in your smoothie, there you go, put it in your smoothie. So
Banana bread.
food waste, we want to make sure it's getting into hungry people's mouths. And secondly, we want to make sure that people shop their refrigerator, that we really avoid food waste. Because when you look at climate impacts, avoiding food waste is actually a huge benefit. So those are three big things we're working on.
All right, let's try to get one or two more questions right here in the front. Chris, Kenzie, and then Brent. But let's get
I'll
up.
try not to be so long-winded in my answers.
So I'm also a city employee. I work for the Department of Building Inspection.
Oh, I love DBI. I love DBI.
We love
We all,
DBI.
doesn't
I
everyone?
do.
I love DBI.
Doesn't everyone? So speaking of that, sometimes, I'm gonna try to put this diplomatically, our processes can feel old-fashioned or outdated. And my question to you is, like you said, San Francisco has set these very ambitious goals. Do you think that these sort of 20th century regulatory agencies are equipped to act as aggressively and to be as nimble and ambitious as they need to be to solve the problem? And if not, what would it look like for the city of San Francisco and all of these departments to be fully mobilized to the extent necessary to actually, meet the crisis?
So I'm gonna give you a happy story, a happy DBI story. So one of the big problems we have right now is construction and demolition waste. All right, it's 25% of what goes to landfill. So it's a huge chunk of our tons that goes to landfill. And we need a way of making sure that anybody does a demolition job, when they pull a permit, that they're actually filing a plan to bring it to a facility that sorts it so it doesn't end up in landfill. Well, Department of the Environment doesn't get the permit applications, but DBI does. Now, DBI has a lot of permits they give out, and they're trying to figure out how do they pay attention to this one, because, in the scale of things, it doesn't seem so important. So there's a computer program called Green Halo, and that is a way to automate this permit process around construction and demolition waste. And so what Department of the Environment is doing is we've got a staff person in our department who works with staff people at DBI to implement Green Halo and massively increase the number of construction jobs that are getting permitted and paid attention to. And then what we'll do is when DBI gives us the heads up, there's a problem, we'll go out in the field and work alongside DBI or works alongside Public Works to do enforcement. So there's an example, to your point, where the solution to that is a 21st century solution, because it relies on automation and it relies on efficiency. And the program existed, but DBI could use our help focusing and getting a new program in place. So to me, it's a great model for what's possible with DBI. And to your larger point, we have to find ways to do that throughout the permitting process. We have all these great laws like green building, but if they're not enforced, then some people are gonna figure that out and they're just gonna ignore them. So thank you for working at DBI. We really need, and being here tonight.
Yeah, what's your name?
Really,
William, thank you, William. Let's get Chris and Kenzie, let's have your questions together and then you can answer both of them.
All right, you brought up a point of how electrification impacts low-income communities. And in California, we already have electricity 75% more expensive than the national average. It's only going up as we have all of these infrastructure things that need to happen. And I worry about this as we talk about taking big loads and making them electrical and having people pay about, people don't understand time of use. Like there's gonna be a big backlash here in a few months when people start to see those new bills. And I work in clean energy and I know we can deliver lower cost energy with solar and batteries and resilience today. And I feel like you brought up this point of how you've worked with these other city agencies, and that's brilliant. I love to see that. I'm a little worried about how we work with this other behemoth.
Called PG&E.
Yeah, and like really where our future is going, because this hurts our economic growth. This hurts our income inequality situations, and it hurts the move to electrification. It's really hard to be an advocate for that if we don't have a road that's possible for everybody. So I know it's not an easy one.
So put a pin in that, let's go to Kenzie, because we have Brandon, we have actually a question online I want to ask, and I want to respect Bruce's time, so Kenzie.
My question is, so San Francisco being one of the most, or if not the most sustainable city in the country, how often are other cities calling you and asking for advice on changing, or how often are your people going to other cities to help them change? And is this something that's going to happen more as climate change becomes a more politically winning issue? How often do you work together?
Yeah, so Mackenzie's first because it's easier. That basically San Francisco is a part of a lot of different networks, the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance, C40 Cities, Urban Sustainability Directors Network. And the thing I love about some of these networks is that they are with blue cities and red states. And that is really, for me, where the excitement is. If we can get blue cities and red states, so Columbia, Missouri, Austin, Texas, you know, these cities that are interested and curious, and we can share our best practices with them and we can learn from them. Detroit, you know, I love working with Detroit. I learned so much from them as well. So, and then on a global scale, we're not as, you know, green as Copenhagen and Sweden, you know, cities in Sweden, but we do think of ourselves as a member state of the EU. So we work a lot with the European Union. So the short answer is yes, it happens all the time. And it's where my heart sings. I love that stuff. PG&E, this is a future thing. Like, get Barbara Hale in here to talk about buying PG&E's infrastructure, or did you already do that?
I don't know who that is.
So Barbara Hale is the head of the power enterprise for San Francisco PUC. She's super smart.
Okay, I was gonna have Jeff Bleich come.
Okay.
Know who he is? He's the chair of the board.
Oh, okay, that's good.
I know him, I was gonna grill him.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll have the two of them. say-
Because Chris's point is super true. Like, we don't control our grid here. So when we want to electrify everything and people need new panels or they need interconnection agreements with the grid, there's gridlock here. I mean, it makes some of our own gridlock look like a well-oiled machine. So it's a real problem. Now, the cost issue is interesting and complicated, as you know, because a lot of these heat pumps are much more efficient and we can reduce the amount of energy you need in a building. And we believe that natural gas is going to go up even faster than electricity. Having said that, we would be remiss not to look at cost impacts, and that is where carbon taxes and things like that are going to have to come in.
Cool, why don't we go to this burning digital question and then we'll have Bryn. Right, did I get that right?
Yeah.
Look at that,
So good with names.
let's have Bryn close us out tonight.
I'm just gonna read this verbatim, so It is so cool to have the director of the Department of the Environment on stage
Woo!
with the director of the SFMTA.
Oh,
In the spirit of interagency collaboration, what are some thoughts on reducing emissions from transportation, maybe in regard to slow streets or in general?
oh, this is a twofer, because I'm on the board of the SMTA.
Oh, I'm thinking, you're not Jeff, so.
I'm
yeah.
a director, I'm a director.
A director.
I'm Director Raphael.
Yes, you are.
And you're Director Raphael.
Yes. Okay, so, all right, go for
Okay,
it.
you're gonna give it to me?
Yeah, I'm giving it to you. I've been
Well,
talking too much.
I would just say that as we heard from this week's news, slow streets and closed streets are not universally beloved in this town. It is a very divided city on these streets. And so for one thing, if you like the idea of slow streets, closed streets to cars, I would definitely not take your foot off the gas in expressing that desire to the decision makers, including me, though, don't waste your time on me, because I'm like probably on the board of directors, I'm probably the most fervent advocate for closed streets and slow streets, because I think that they create, not only are they good for the environment and small business, but civic pride and inspiration and love of place. So, but I will say the SFMTA board agrees with that, but supervisors don't all agree with that, and so I would say communicate that desire to the supervisors and the mayor and her office. I think that our city is much more conservative around the way we think about cars than we would expect of a progressive city like San Francisco. I don't think, I know. And it's really sad and disappointing, I think. And so the answer on my end is I'm really trying to figure out how, as a board member of our public transit agency, I have an impact on that. And as the one real small business representative, not the one, but the one who owns a small business and is in community, I'm still figuring out how I fight for this particular thing. How the two of us can work together. I mean, I know we've worked together a lot in our, we've just voted on, I think, almost $60 million worth, or even more, of new vehicles, and the way we're purchasing vehicles, the kinds of vehicles we're purchasing, and the fleet of the future. We really are investing in hybrid, in electric vehicles. And so your money is where your mouth is, and we're spending money on vehicles, on zero emission vehicles, of course. And the last thing I would say is, like, the more we can encourage San Franciscans to take public transit and actually use our transportation system, the lower our reliance on cars will be. And so, are you using public transit to get places? Are you encouraging your friends when you're going to the mall in Westfield? Like, are you all just gonna take the M or the K, or are you gonna take an Uber? And so part of it is, like, my role also as a board member is encouraging San Franciscans to take public transit, I think. What do you think?
No, absolutely. We have a goal to have 80% of our trips in sustainable modes or low carbon modes, and we are far from that. You know, we're in the 50 range, and that's great for a city, urban city in the US. It's nowhere near where we need to be. And, 47% of our emissions comes from transportation. 70% of that comes from from cars, from people in their private vehicles. So people in their private vehicles, this is what we need to tackle here. And we tackle it in two ways. Number one, it's get out of the car. That's that, get on public transit. And then if you have to own a car, if you really still need it, it needs to be electric. So that's how we deal with the emissions. The slow street, I love the way you said that slow streets, closed streets, shared spaces, these are all ways that we have a sense of place. And I think it gets back to an early part of our conversation, that sort of question of how do we learn from the pandemic and keep what was good from the pandemic? And that sense of quiet and calm and collective space, it's ruined by the car, whether you're electric or gasoline. And how can we take that back as our vision of our city? This is our goal. It's a great question, and I think honestly, it's gonna be harder than the building side. I think that decarbonizing buildings is gonna be easier than dealing with our cars.
And also stay tuned, because I will say that the SNMTA, we are cooking up a bunch of stuff, but there's a lot of politics around it. Bryn and Mac, right? Close us out. What's your final comment, question, idea that you want to bring to the table?
Your name recognition is.
Isn't it amazing? It's amazing, Manny, it's amazing.
Aw, thanks.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation today. At least for me, it's a little difficult sometimes to keep this, the scale of, me bringing a plastic bag to the grocery store in context when we hear about just emissions from something like the Dixie Fire alone. And for me, things like the plastic bag rules here, where I have to kind of shamefully ask for a bag at checkout and pay a few extra cents, have been a helpful nudge for me. I'm curious what other policies you or your department would like to see in transit or waste as similar methods to put us on the right track.
Yeah, well, we had a lot in the irons in the fire, so to speak, and then the pandemic hit, and we're being very cognizant of putting new requirements on small business, that it's just may not be the right moment to do that. So one of the things we're looking at is, does it make sense for a business where you eat in, that they give you a disposable item? Like if you eat in, they should give you a plate, not a to-go thing. So that Berkeley mandated that, and other cities have done that, and we were thinking about that as a way. We were thinking about charges on cups. It's hard, some of these charges are very regressive, and so there's sometimes better ways. The nudge is really important, but what we've been doing a lot on the waste side is we've got some new legislation passed. Supervisor Safai is a real champion on these zero waste issues. And he worked with us to do a law that is requiring large commercial buildings and apartment buildings to be audited. So they're green, blue, and black get audited. And if they're contaminated, so if the black is contaminated, that means it has recyclables and compostables in it. Then we have enforcement ways of having them sort or do outreach. So we're kind of going away from the nudges and more into the hammers, because.
Here comes Tracy.
Yeah, here comes Tracy. Because some of the, we've nudged for a long time and we've gotten really far here, and it's not just so much your individual behavior, it's more looking at the larger sources of waste at this point. But in terms of, so that's what I would say on the waste side, is we're really trying to ask ourselves, what can we do to support reusables? And then to Garrett's point, are there innovative businesses that can come in and disrupt the to-go industry? So that's interesting to us.
Thank you for that question. So it's 7:09, we started at 6:12, so we've had less than an hour, which means we can do our little breakout discussion group thing, which is a 5-minute thing. Where the question I'm gonna ask you to break out in groups of 4 and spend 5 minutes discussing amongst your group is, what is one commitment that you're gonna leave tonight? A new commitment. I know you're all environmentalists and you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's, but I'm challenging you to make one new commitment tonight in your group of 4. I'm gonna join Bryn and Mac, and we're gonna make commitments together for 5 minutes. We're not gonna come back, so after you've done that, you can leave. But before we break out in our groups, a couple things. One, if you wanna support us, you can scan the QR codes on these pillars and become a Manny sponsor. It's $36 a month, and it allows us to keep doing this important work, which we firmly believe in. I wanna thank Precious Green, our new director of programming, who's building up to really be the engine of this space and coming up with new programs. So if you have an idea for something that you want to have happen, please see her, or if you want to become a sponsor. Thank you to Tomas, our head of research, and Ram, here, our head of operations, for running the Zoom. Thank you everyone for tuning in on Zoom. A couple quick, a round of applause for my staff. Thank you. And Lisa and JD's here from Farming Hope. A couple upcoming events. Sunday, we're doing our second installment of the monthly Manny's trash pickup.
Yes.
So 10 o'clock, if you want to come here and meet me, we're gonna be, the Department of Public Works has given us an area to clean up around here. It's a 2-block circle, and they're providing trash picker upper things and all that stuff. And we're doing a 1-hour trash pickup And then we're all gonna have brunch here. So come join our monthly trash pickup. Second one is this Sunday at 10. Next Tuesday, we have the president of the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco, Shaman Walton. And if you care about slow streets and closed streets, great thing would be to ask him about it. And see what he thinks and where his head's at. And then quickly, we're doing so many things. I want to remind you on Wednesday night, I'm not interviewing, I won't be here, but we have an amazing panel with 3 folks that run religious sanctuaries in 3 different world religions, talking about what they learned about running a religious sanctuary over the last year and a half. And then on Thursday, we have a twofer, really beautiful. The chair of the Democratic Caucus in Congress in the House of Representatives, Hakeem Jeffries, is going to be here. He's an amazing man. Many people are saying he'll be the next Speaker of the House in like 2 years. So definitely, if you want to meet the next Speaker of the House, come to a free event here next Thursday. And after that, we'll be in conversation with the new Secretary of State of California, Shirley Weber, who is running all of our elections. And she's going to help answer questions about the recall, voting rights, all that stuff. She's an amazing person herself. Lots of amazing events, lots of amazing free events coming up. So do show up. Anything else? Ram, Tomas, folks, friends? All right.
Thank you, Manny.
Oh, you're welcome. All right. So people around you and get into your group and make one commitment. You're gonna not leave the room until you've made that commitment amongst your group. My staff, you're included in this, so find a group.
I feel like you're. Maybe I
Work with them, it's very slow.
All the stuff
That'll do the job.
I'm gonna send less emails.
Well, there's an event tomorrow. I was listening to a show about Line 3. You know about Line 3? Pipeline through Minnesota. Yeah.
I did, yeah.
And it's funded indigenous.
Someone needs like an ASL interpreter.
I think there's an event tomorrow about it.
Oh, yeah, there was somebody. I just gave them all code.
Now it's
And
maybe
she was like, unless you want to have somebody, I was like, I don't know how to integrate that, so.
We have full captions. I don't know how
Okay, at the Wells Fargo headquarters.
it on, so I have it on.
7 is one, but
Because I just feel like they. So you know the. I don't know, you're the environment. What?
That's awesome. No, I'm so glad.
Yeah.
There's buses that go to
Welcome to
Rigo.
your first time at it.
Probably not my last.
Whereas.
Or you can just change out for an EV.
Cause I went, I traveled, I did go to Raphael.
Yeah, so that is.
I was just kind of like, the amount of traffic situation right up at the building. Great. But I realized it's on Market Street across the road. So it used to be. So summer. I'm very proud.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say a quick announcement. If you're still looking for your commitment for environmental related stuff, there's a protest at Wells Fargo tomorrow in San Francisco, protesting line 3. So it's 7 p.m. at 420 Montgomery Street at the Wells Fargo. There's gonna be a nonviolent direct action. So you can ask me more details if you want it, but yeah.
Yes.
Wait. I agree with full acceptance.
Well, thank you, thanks for your initial question. I mean, it's a big, not even.
But there doesn't need more.
I have my like water bottle.
Yeah, that's the first, that's an easy one.
I mean, there's so embedded. Like, I couldn't really.
You're not using like. It's like saying you're not an energy tank to like use single use items like that. Water gets used in all the compost process, so part of like compost is basically like these big dumpster piles like sitting out in the thing and it constantly like irrigating it. And it's like naturally.
All right.
So there's water. Plus like you're very much underestimating the scale of water. So like wash a plate, the amount of water that it takes to wash a plate or like super touch it to like this route problems. You can't use normal metrics. Like you can't use like gallons of water.
Are you
It's a drought or like the amount of water that we have. It's like it would be like using like numbers that for a range of how many gallons of water. The amount of water it takes to like wash the dishwasher or it's so infinitesimal, like it has no impact. That's why it's like it's starting to watering aesthetics. Like it has no use for the process. The amount of water is no. It's so minimal. It's a lazy argument.
It's my microphone.
Yeah, and it's also like the water doesn't.
I just didn't want to do like half on people and sort of half on people. That was.
You have a plate. A paper plate has zero. These cameras like to replace. And then it's like. Most of that stuff, most of that kind of like bioplastic wax. There's no like. There's no like nutritional benefit. It's basically just the fact that it's like more fixed. It's not like trying to help you out. No farmer's like, you know, it's like.